The roar of engines filled the air as I stepped onto the track, my heart pounding in sync with the revving motors. It had been a year since my last race, a year since that damn crash nearly ended my career. But here I was, Catherine Turner, back in the driver's seat and ready to prove I still had what it took. I strutted down pit row, my blonde hair tucked under my racing cap, sunglasses hiding the nervousness in my blue eyes. The team bustled around me, prepping for the qualifying round. I nodded at familiar faces, trying to ignore the whispers and sideways glances. They all wondered if I still had it in me. As I approached my car, I froze. There, bent over the hood, was a figure I'd recognize anywhere. Those curves, that brunette ponytail. No, it couldn't be. Georgia? I croaked, my voice barely audible over the cacophony of the track. She turned, those piercing green eyes meeting mine. "Hey, Kath," she said, wiping her hands on a rag. "Long time no see." My mind reeled. Georgia Washington, my ex, the woman who'd broken my heart 3 years ago, was standing there like she belonged. And judging by the chief mechanic badge on her jumpsuit, she did. "What are you doing here?" I managed to ask, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm your new chief mechanic," she replied, a small smile playing on her lips. Surprise? Gosh, surprise was an understatement. I felt like I'd been sucker punched. Memories flooded back, our first meeting during that hurricane relief effort, working side by side in the sweltering heat, the stolen glances, the nights spent talking under the stars. "Miss Turner," a voice snapped me back to reality. It was Marcus, my team owner, waving me over. "We need to discuss strategy before the qualifying round." I nodded, grateful for the distraction. "We'll catch up later," I told Georgia, my voice more curt than I'd intended. As I walked away, I could feel her eyes on me. This was going to complicate things, big time. How was I supposed to focus on my comeback when the woman who'd shattered my heart was now responsible for keeping my car and, by extension, me, in one piece? The strategy meeting was a blur. All I could think about was Georgia. Why was she here? Why now? And how the hell was I going to handle working so closely with her? As I suited up for the qualifying round, my mind drifted back to that fateful summer 3 years ago. The hurricane had devastated Hialeah, and we'd both volunteered for the relief efforts. I remember the first time I saw her, covered in mud but grinning from ear to ear as she helped clear debris from an elderly couple's home. We'd clicked instantly, spending every free moment together. Georgia's mechanical skills had been invaluable in getting damaged vehicles back on the road, and I'd used my connections in the racing world to bring in much-needed supplies. One night, exhausted but exhilarated after a long day of work, we'd found ourselves alone in the volunteer tent. The air was thick with tension and unspoken desires. And then, as if drawn by some invisible force, we'd kissed. It was electric, passionate, everything I'd ever wanted but never knew I needed. "Catherine?" Georgia's voice jolted me back to the present. She was standing at the entrance to my changing area, holding my helmet. "You forgot this." Our fingers brushed as she handed it to me, sending a jolt through my body. "Thanks," I mumbled, avoiding her gaze. As I walked towards my car, I could hear the crowd cheering. This was it, my chance to prove I was still a force to be reckoned with. But with Georgia back in my life, I realized I might be racing for more than just my career. I was racing for my heart, too. The days following my return to the track were a whirlwind of emotions and barely contained tension. Every time I saw Georgia, my heart did a little flip in my chest. It was infuriating. I was supposed to be focused on my comeback, not daydreaming about my ex like some lovesick teenager. During team meetings, I found myself stealing glances at her. Georgia's brow would furrow in concentration as she explained the latest tweaks to the engine, her hands moving animatedly. It was all I could do to keep my mind on the race strategies, and not on how those hands used to feel on my skin. "Catherine, are you even listening?" Marcus's exasperated voice cut through my reverie. I blinked, realizing I'd been staring at Georgia for the past 5 minutes. "Sorry, just thinking about the track conditions," I lied smoothly. Georgia raised an eyebrow, a knowing smirk playing on her lips. Damn her. She could always see right through me. As the days wore on, whispers started circulating around the pit. I caught snippets of conversation here and there. "Did you hear about Turner and Washington? I heard they used to be an item. No wonder the atmosphere's so tense." It was maddening. I wanted to scream at them all to mind their own business, but that would only confirm their suspicions. Instead, I threw myself into training, pushing my body to its limits on the track and in the gym. One evening, as I was leaving the fitness center, I quite literally ran into Georgia. She steadied me with a hand on my arm, and I felt that old familiar spark. "Whoa there, speed demon," she chuckled. "Save some energy for the race, yeah?" I pulled away, perhaps a bit too quickly. "I know what I'm doing, Georgia. I don't need you to babysit me." Her expression hardened. "I'm not babysitting you, Catherine. I'm doing my job. And right now, my job is to make sure you're in top form for the race." We stood there, tension crackling between us like live wires. Part of me wanted to grab her and kiss her senseless, while another part wanted to push her away and run. Before I could do either, an alarm blared through the complex. "Shit!" Georgia cursed, already moving towards the garage. "That's the emergency system. Something's wrong with the car." I followed her, my heart racing for reasons that had nothing to do with the potential mechanical failure. When we reached the garage, we found it deserted. Everyone else had gone home for the night. Georgia immediately went to work, her fingers flying over the diagnostic equipment. I stood there, feeling useless and out of place in my own garage. "Pass me that wrench, will you?" she called out, her voice muffled as she leaned into the engine compartment. I handed it to her, our fingers brushing. This time, neither of us pulled away immediately. For a moment, we were frozen, connected by a simple tool and years of complicated history. Georgia broke the spell first, clearing her throat and returning to the engine. "Looks like a fuel line issue. We can fix it, but it's going to take a while." I nodded, rolling up my sleeves. "Then let's get to work." We worked in silence for hours, moving around each other with a familiarity that belied our years apart. It was like a dance, one we'd never quite forgotten the steps to. As the first rays of dawn began to peek through the garage windows, Georgia straightened up, wiping sweat from her brow. "That should do it," she said, her voice hoarse from fatigue. I looked at her then, really looked at her. Her hair was a mess, there was a smudge of grease on her cheek, and she'd never looked more beautiful to me. "Georgia," I started, not sure what I was going to say. She held up a hand, stopping me. "Don't, Kath. We can't. I can't do this again." The pain in her voice was like a knife to my heart. I wanted to argue, to tell her that maybe this time could be different. But I knew she was right. We had a job to do, a race to win. Everything else had to take a back seat. "You're right," I said, forcing a smile. "Thanks for staying to fix this. I owe you one." Georgia nodded, her eyes unreadable. "Just win the race, Turner. That'll be thanks enough." As she left the garage, I couldn't help but feel like I'd lost something all over again. But I pushed the feeling down. I had a race to prepare for, and I couldn't let my feelings for Georgia distract me. Little did I know, the real challenges were only just beginning. The day of the qualifying race dawned bright and clear, but my mind was anything but. As I suited up, I could feel the weight of expectations pressing down on me. It wasn't just about proving myself after the crash anymore. Now I had sponsors breathing down my neck, demanding results. "Turner," Marcus's voice cut through my thoughts. "The Johnson Group is here. They want to talk to you before the race." I suppressed a groan. The Johnson Group was our biggest sponsor, and they were notoriously demanding. "I'll be right there," I called back, forcing a smile onto my face. As I made my way to the VIP area, I caught sight of Georgia talking animatedly with some of the pit crew. She looked up, our eyes meeting for a brief moment before I quickly looked away. I couldn't afford any distractions, not today. The meeting with the sponsors was grueling. They peppered me with questions about my readiness, my commitment, my plans for the future. I answered each one with practiced ease, but inside I was a bundle of nerves. "We're expecting great things from you, Catherine, Mr. Johnson said as the meeting wrapped up. "Don't let us down. No pressure, right?" As I headed back to the pit, I overheard two crew members whispering. "Did you hear? Washington nearly quit last night. Something about unresolved tension with Turner." My heart skipped a beat. Georgia had almost quit? Because of me? I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, but there was no time. The qualifying race was about to begin. I slid into my car, trying to focus on the feel of the steering wheel beneath my hands, the roar of the engine. But my mind kept drifting to Georgia. Had I pushed her too far? Was our past really so insurmountable? "All right, Catherine," Georgia's voice crackled through my headset, all business. Remember, we've made some adjustments to the suspension. It might feel a bit different in the turns. Got it, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. As I pulled onto the track, I forced everything else out of my mind. The sponsors, the rumors, Georgia, none of it mattered now. It was just me, the car, and the asphalt stretching out before me. The race was a blur of speed and adrenaline. I pushed the car to its limits, feeling it respond to my every command. It was exhilarating, reminding me why I'd fallen in love with racing in the first place. As I crossed the finish line, securing a spot in the pole position, I let out a whoop of joy. I'd done it. I'd proven I still had what it took. The celebration in the pit was electric. Everyone was cheering, patting me on the back. But I was looking for one person in particular. I found Georgia by my car, running her hands over the engine with a look of pride. When she saw me approach, she straightened up, a small smile on her face. "Nice driving out there, Turner," she said, her voice warm. Before I could overthink it, I pulled her into a hug. "Couldn't have done it without you," I whispered. For a moment, we stood there, wrapped in each other's arms. I could feel her heart beating against my chest, could smell the familiar scent of motor oil and her favorite perfume. It felt like coming home. Then, as if remembering where we were, Georgia pulled away, but not before I caught a glimpse of something in her eyes. Longing, maybe? Or was I just seeing what I wanted to see? The moment was interrupted by Marcus, who came barreling over with a bottle of champagne. "You did it, Catherine," he shouted, popping the cork and spraying us all with bubbly. As the team celebrated around us, I couldn't take my eyes off Georgia. She was laughing, her hair glistening with champagne, her green eyes sparkling. And in that moment, I knew I was in trouble. Because despite everything, despite the years apart and the pain we'd caused each other, I was falling for her all over again. The celebration continued late into the night. As things were winding down, I found myself alone in the garage, running my hand over the smooth curve of my car's hood. It had been a hell of a day. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Georgia's voice startled me. She was leaning against the doorframe, a soft smile on her face. "Just thinking about how much has changed," I said honestly. "And how much hasn't?" Georgia moved closer, her eyes never leaving mine. "Kath, about last night, I'm sorry if I was harsh. It's just being around you again, it's stirring up a lot of old feelings." My heart raced. Good feelings or bad ones? She was close now, close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in her green eyes. "Both," she whispered. "That's what scares me." I don't know who moved first. One moment we were standing there, the air thick with tension, and the next we were kissing. It was hungry, desperate. Years of pent-up longing poured into a single moment. When we finally broke apart, both breathless, I rested my forehead against hers. "Georgia, She placed a finger on my lips, silencing me. "Not now," she said softly. "Let's just have this moment." As we stood there in the quiet of the garage, wrapped in each other's arms, I knew that everything had changed. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with potential pitfalls and challenges. But for now, in this perfect moment, none of that mattered. All that mattered was Georgia, and the promise of a second chance at love. The days following our kiss in the garage were a whirlwind of stolen glances and hidden smiles. Georgia and I tried to maintain a professional facade, but it was like trying to hold back a tidal wave with a picket fence. Every accidental brush of hands, every late-night strategy session, left me yearning for more. But reality had a way of intruding on our bubble of rekindled romance. The pressure from sponsors was mounting, and rumors of Georgia's potential departure were swirling around the pit. "Turner," Marcus called out one afternoon, his face creased with worry. "Got a minute?" I nodded, following him to his office. The moment I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. Mr. Johnson from our main sponsor was there, along with a woman I didn't recognize. "Catherine," Mr. Johnson began, his tone ominously formal. "This is Amber Collins from Velocity Racing." My stomach dropped. Velocity was our biggest rival, known for poaching top talent. "Ms. Collins has made a very generous offer to bring Georgia Washington onto their team," Marcus explained, his expression pained. The room spun around me. Georgia leaving? Now? Just when we were finding our way back to each other? "We wanted to give you a heads up," Mr. Johnson continued, "given your history with Miss Washington." I bristled at the implication. My personal life has nothing to do with this team's performance, I snapped. Amber Collins raised an eyebrow. On the contrary, Miss Turner, team dynamics are crucial in this sport. And from what I've observed, your dynamics with MS Washington are complicated. I wanted to scream, to tell them all to mind their own damn business. Instead, I plastered on a fake smile. Thank you for the information. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a race to prepare for. I stormed out of the office, my mind reeling. I needed to find Georgia, to talk to her about this offer. But as I rounded the corner to the garage, I collided with someone. Whoa there, lead foot, Georgia chuckled, steadying me. Her smile faded when she saw my expression. Kath? What's wrong? I pulled her into an empty storage room, ignoring her protests. Did you know about the offer from Velocity? I demanded. Georgia's eyes widened. How did you? So you did know, I interrupted, hurt and anger bubbling up inside me. Were you even going to tell me? Of course I was, she said, reaching for my hand. I pulled away. Kath, it's not what you think. I haven't made any decisions yet. But you're considering it. The thought of her leaving, of losing her again, was almost unbearable. Georgia sighed, running a hand through her hair. It's a great opportunity, Catherine. The kind that doesn't come around often in this business. I knew she was right, but it didn't make it hurt any less. So what now? I asked, hating how vulnerable I sounded. Before she could answer, an alarm blared through the complex. Shit, Georgia cursed. That's the weather alert. The race might be delayed. We rushed out to the track, where dark clouds were rolling in ominously. Marcus was already there, looking up at the sky with concern. They're saying it's going to hit right when the race is supposed to start, he informed us. We might have to postpone. As if on cue, fat raindrops began to fall, quickly turning into a downpour. The crew scrambled to cover the cars and equipment. In the chaos, I found myself next to Georgia, under the awning of the pit area. We stood in silence, watching the rain lash against the track. I never stopped loving you, you know, I said quietly, not looking at her. Even when I tried to hate you, I couldn't. Georgia's hand found mine, intertwining our fingers. I know, she whispered. Me neither. The rain continued to pour, but I barely noticed. All I could focus on was the warmth of Georgia's hand in mine, the sound of her breathing next to me. Finally, after what felt like hours, the rain began to let up. Marcus approached us, shaking water from his jacket. Good news and bad news, he announced. Race is postponed until tomorrow, but we've got clearance to do some practice laps once the track dries. I nodded, suddenly eager to get behind the wheel. I needed the clarity that only comes with high speeds and hairpin turns. As I suited up, Georgia appeared at my side. Be careful out there, she said softly. The track will be slippery. On impulse, I leaned in and kissed her, not caring who saw. For luck, I murmured against her lips. The practice laps were exhilarating. The wet track added an extra element of danger, requiring all of my focus and skill. As I navigated a particularly tricky turn, I heard Georgia's voice in my ear through the radio. Easy on that corner, Kath. She's drifting a bit to the left. Her calm guidance steadied me, reminding me of all the reasons why we worked so well together, both on and off the track. As I pulled back into the pit after the final lap, I saw Georgia waiting for me, a stopwatch in her hand and a proud smile on her face. Fastest time of the day, she announced as I climbed out of the car. Even on a wet track, you've still got it, Turner. The compliment warmed me more than I cared to admit. Well, I've got a pretty great mechanic, I replied with a wink. We stood there for a moment, grinning at each other like lovesick teenagers. Then, remembering where we were, we both sobered. We should talk, Georgia said, her expression turning serious. About Velocity, about us, about everything. I nodded, suddenly nervous. Yeah, we should. My trailer? As we walked to my trailer, I couldn't help but feel like we were on the precipice of something big. Whatever happened next would change everything, for better or worse. Inside the trailer, away from prying eyes, the tension between us was palpable. Georgia paced the small space, her brow furrowed in thought. I haven't accepted Velocity's offer, she finally said, turning to face me. I wanted to talk to you first. Relief flooded through me, followed quickly by guilt. I don't want to hold you back, Georgia, if this is what you want. She cut me off, closing the distance between us. What I want, she said softly, is you, us. But I need to know if we're on the same page this time. I reached out, cupping her face in my hands. We are, I whispered. I'm all in if you are. The kiss that followed was different from our first in the garage. That had been desperate, hungry. This was slow, deep, full of promise. When we finally broke apart, breathless and flushed, I knew we'd crossed a line there was no coming back from. Whatever challenges lay ahead, we'd face them together. As if reading my thoughts, Georgia smiled. So partner, she said, her eyes twinkling. Ready to show them what we can do? I grinned back, feeling more alive than I had in years. Let's go win us a race. The morning of the big race dawned clear and bright, a stark contrast to the tumultuous emotions swirling inside me. Georgia and I had spent most of the night talking, mapping out our future together. It felt surreal, like a dream I was afraid to wake up from. As I made my way to the pit, I overheard snippets of conversation that made my blood run cold. Did you hear about the merger? Yeah. They say it's going to shake up the whole racing circuit. I heard Turner and Washington might end up in different divisions. My heart sank. A merger? Different divisions? Just when Georgia and I had found our way back to each other, fate seemed determined to tear us apart again. I spotted Marcus huddled with a group of suits near the VIP area, his face grave. When he saw me approaching, he excused himself and made his way over. Catherine, he began, his tone cautious. We need to talk. I braced myself for the worst. Is it about the merger? Marcus nodded, looking pained. It's not finalized yet, but it's not looking good for keeping the team together as is. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. What does that mean for Georgia and me? Best case scenario? You end up in different racing divisions. Worst case. He trailed off, but I could fill in the blanks. Worst case, one of us would be out of a job. I thanked Marcus for the heads up and made my way to the garage in a daze. Georgia was there, bent over the engine of my car, completely focused on her work. For a moment, I just watched her, drinking in the sight of her. How could I possibly give this up? Hey, I said softly, not wanting to startle her. Georgia looked up, a smile spreading across her face. Hey yourself, she replied, wiping her hands on a rag. Ready for the big race? I wanted to tell her about the merger, about the possibility of us being separated. But looking at her, so happy and confident, I couldn't bring myself to burst that bubble. Not yet. Born ready, I said instead, forcing a smile. How's she looking? I nodded towards the car. Georgia patted the hood affectionately. Like a dream. She'll fly for you today, I promise. As we went through our pre-race routine, I tried to push thoughts of the merger out of my mind. I needed to focus on the race, on proving to everyone, including myself, that I was still at the top of my game. The atmosphere at the starting line was electric. Fans cheered from the stands, cameras flashed, and the roar of engines filled the air. As I settled into my car, I felt a calm settle over me. This was where I belonged. All right, Kath, George's voice crackled through my headset. Remember, we've made some adjustments to improve your cornering. Trust the car. Trust yourself. Roger that, I replied, my heart swelling at her use of my nickname. The race was intense from the start. I jockeyed for position, pushing my car to its limits. George's voice was a constant in my ear, guiding me through the twists and turns of the track. Halfway through the race, disaster struck. As I came out of a particularly tight turn, I felt the car start to fishtail. Georgia, I called out, fighting to regain control. Something's wrong with the rear suspension. Stay calm, she replied, her voice steady. I'm looking at the telemetry now. Can you make it to the pit? I gritted my teeth, wrestling with the steering wheel. I'll try. Those few laps to the pit were some of the most harrowing of my career. When I finally pulled in, Georgia was there in an instant, barking orders to the pit crew. We can fix this, she assured me as she worked, her hands moving with practiced precision. But it'll be close. You'll have to make up a lot of ground. As I waited, my mind raced. If I couldn't finish this race, if I couldn't prove I was still a contender, what would happen with the merger? Would I be the one left without a team? Okay, you're good to go, Georgia said, snapping me out of my thoughts. Now get out there and win this thing. I roared back onto the track, more determined than ever. The rest of the race was a blur of speed and adrenaline. I pushed harder than I ever had before, clawing my way back through the pack. As I crossed the finish line, I wasn't sure where I'd placed. It wasn't until I heard the cheers from my team that I realized I'd won. Against all odds, I'd won. The celebration in the winner's circle was a whirlwind of champagne and cameras. But all I wanted was to find Georgia. When I finally spotted her on the edge of the crowd, I didn't hesitate. I ran to her, swept her up in my arms, and kissed her full on the mouth, not caring who saw. The crowd went wild, but I barely noticed. All I could focus on was Georgia, the feel of her in my arms, the taste of her lips. When we finally broke apart, both breathless and grinning, I knew it was time to face reality. "Georgia," I said, my voice serious despite the joy of the moment, "we need to talk about the merger." Her smile faded, replaced by a look of concern. "What merger?" I took a deep breath and told her everything I'd learned. As I spoke, I could see the realization dawning in her eyes, the same fear and uncertainty I'd been grappling with. "So what do we do?" she asked when I'd finished. I took her hand, intertwining our fingers. "I don't know," I admitted. "But whatever happens, we face it together. I'm not losing you again." Georgia squeezed my hand, her green eyes shining with determination. "No, you're not," she agreed. "We'll figure this out, Kath. We always do." As we stood there, surrounded by the chaos of the post-race celebration but lost in our own world, I felt a surge of hope. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever obstacles the merger might throw our way, I knew we could overcome them. Because this time, we had each other. The road ahead might be uncertain, but one thing was clear: our love was worth fighting for, and fight we would with everything we had. The aftermath of my victory was a whirlwind of interviews, photo shoots, and champagne toasts, but through it all, a gnawing anxiety ate at me. The merger loomed over everything like a storm cloud, threatening to wash away the future Georgia and I had just begun to build. A week after the race, I found myself in Marcus's office, staring down at a contract that could change everything. The Velocity Racing logo gleamed at the top of the page, promising prestige, resources, and a salary that made my eyes water. "It's a hell of an offer, Catherine," Marcus said, his voice a mix of pride and resignation. "They want you to be the face of their new division. It's the kind of opportunity that comes once in a lifetime." I nodded, my throat tight. "And Georgia?" Marcus's face fell. They don't have a place for her in the new structure, at least not in the same division as you." The words hit me like a physical blow. I thought of Georgia's brilliant mind, her magic touch with engines. How could they not see her value? "I can't do this without her," I said, pushing the contract away. "She's the reason I'm even in a position to get this offer." Marcus sighed, leaning back in his chair. "I know, kid, but you've got to think about your career. This kind of chance." "My career?" I interrupted, a spark of anger igniting in my chest. "My career is nothing without her. She's not just my mechanic, Marcus. She's everything." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. Marcus's eyes widened slightly, understanding dawning on his face. "Ah," he said softly. "I see." I stood up, suddenly needing to move, to do something. "I need time to think about this," I said. "And I need to talk to Georgia." Marcus nodded, his expression softening. "Take the time you need. But Catherine?" I paused at the door, looking back at him. "Whatever you decide, I'm proud of you." I left his office with my head spinning, making my way to the garage on autopilot. Georgia was there, as I knew she would be, tinkering with a new engine design. She looked up as I entered, her smile fading when she saw my expression. "What's wrong?" I told her everything about the Velocity offer, about the implications for our future together. As I spoke, I watched a range of emotions play across her face: surprise, hurt, anger, and finally, a fierce determination. "So," she said when I'd finished, her voice carefully controlled, "what are you going to do?" I moved closer to her, taking her grease-stained hands in mine. "I don't know," I admitted, "but I know I can't do this without you. I won't." Georgia's eyes softened, but there was still a hint of steel in her gaze. "Kath, this is your dream. I can't let you throw it away from me." "You're my dream," I said fiercely. "Racing, winning, none of it means anything if you're not by my side." She pulled me into a tight embrace, and I breathed in the familiar scent of motor oil and her favorite perfume. For a moment we just stood there, holding each other in the quiet of the garage. Finally, Georgia pulled back, a mischievous glint in her eye. "You know," she said, "there might be a way we can have our cake and eat it too." I raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "I'm listening." Georgia grinned, that brilliant mind of hers already racing ahead. "What if we start our own team?" The idea hit me like a bolt of lightning. Our own team. No corporate politics, no separating us into different divisions. Just me, Georgia, and the open road. "It's crazy," I said, a smile spreading across my face. "It's absolutely insane." "But?" Georgia prompted, her eyes dancing with excitement. "But it just might work," I finished, laughing. We spent the next few hours brainstorming, our enthusiasm growing with each passing minute. By the time we emerged from the garage, the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "We should celebrate," I said, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. "Dinner?" Georgia smiled, linking her arm through mine. "I have a better idea." She led me to her car, refusing to tell me where we were going. As we drove through the darkening streets of Hialeah, I felt a sense of anticipation building. Finally, we pulled up to a familiar gate, the racetrack. Georgia flashed an ID to the security guard, who waved us through with a knowing smile. "How did you—" I began, but Georgia just winked. "I have my ways," she said mysteriously. We parked near the starting line, the track eerily quiet without the roar of engines and cheering crowds. Georgia popped the trunk, pulling out a blanket and a bottle of champagne. "I thought we could use a proper celebration," she said, spreading the blanket on the track. As we sat there, sipping champagne and watching the stars come out, I felt a profound sense of rightness. This was where we belonged, not just on the track, but together. "You know," I said, running my fingers through Georgia's hair, "starting our own team is going to be hard. Really hard." She leaned into my touch, her eyes meeting mine. "I know, but we can do it, together." I smiled, remembering all we'd been through, all we'd overcome. "Together," I agreed. As if on cue, a shooting star streaked across the sky. We both laughed, the sound echoing across the empty track. "Make a wish," Georgia whispered. I turned to her, cupping her face in my hands. "I don't need to," I said softly. "I've got everything I could ever wish for right here." Our lips met in a kiss that tasted of champagne and promises. As we lay there on the track, planning our future and trading soft kisses, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we'd face them side by side. The road might be long and winding, but with Georgia by my side, I was ready for the ride of my life. The months following our decision to start our own racing team were a whirlwind of activity. Georgia and I threw ourselves into the work, spending long days poring over business plans and even longer nights hunched over engine designs. It was exhausting, exhilarating, and terrifying all at once. "You know," Georgia said one night, her voice muffled by the stack of paperwork she was buried in, "when I imagined spending my nights with you, this wasn't exactly what I had in mind." I couldn't help but laugh, tossing a crumpled-up design sketch at her head. "Careful there, Washington. Keep talking like that, and I might start to think you're only after my body." She caught the paper ball with a grin, her green eyes twinkling. "Well, it is a nice body." Our playful banter was interrupted by a knock at the door. It was Marcus, looking exhausted but excited. "I've got news," he said, collapsing into a chair. "Good and bad. Which do you want first?" Georgia and I exchanged a glance. "Hit us with the bad," I said, bracing myself. Marcus sighed. "The corporate bigwigs aren't happy about you two going off on your own. They're making noise about breach of contract, non-compete clauses, all sorts of legal mumbo-jumbo." My heart sank. We'd known there might be pushback, but this sounded serious. "And the good news?" I asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. To my surprise, Marcus grinned. "I've got a friend in legal who's willing to take on your case pro bono. Says he's always wanted to stick it to the corporate racing world." Relief flooded through me. It wasn't a solution, but it was a start. "Marcus, you're a lifesaver." He waved off my thanks. "Just promise me I'll have a job when this new team of yours takes off." As Marcus left, Georgia turned to me, her expression serious. "Kath, maybe we should reconsider, if they're coming after us legally." I cut her off with a kiss. "No way, we're in this together, remember? Besides," I added with a smirk, "I've always liked a good fight." Georgia laughed, shaking her head. You're impossible, you know that? Yeah, I replied, pulling her close. But you love me anyway. The next few weeks were a blur of meetings with lawyers, potential sponsors, and team members. We were making progress, but it felt like for every step forward, we took 2 steps back. Then, just when things were looking their bleakest, Georgia had a breakthrough. I found her in the garage late one night, surrounded by scattered parts and diagrams. Her hair was a mess, there was a smudge of grease on her cheek, and she had never looked more beautiful. "Kath," she exclaimed when she saw me, her eyes wild with excitement. "I've got it, a new engine design that'll blow everything else out of the water." She launched into an explanation that was way over my head, full of technical terms and complex physics. But I didn't need to understand the details to see the genius of it. "Georgia," I said when she finally paused for breath, "this is incredible, game-changing." She beamed at me, her face flushed with pride. "With this, we can prove to everyone that we're not just some flash in the pan. We're the real deal." I pulled her into a fierce hug, my heart swelling with love and admiration. "You're amazing, you know that?" She leaned back, a mischievous glint in her eye. "Yeah, but I like hearing you say it." Our celebration was cut short by a rumble of thunder. We looked out the garage door to see dark clouds rolling in, the air heavy with the promise of rain. "Looks like a storm's coming," Georgia observed. I nodded, a sudden idea forming. "Hey, want to take the new design for a test drive?" Georgia's eyes widened. "In this weather? Are you crazy?" I grinned. "Maybe a little. But think about it. If the car can handle these conditions, it can handle anything." She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "All right, Turner, let's do this." We scrambled to get the car ready, working in perfect sync as the first drops of rain began to fall. By the time we pulled onto the track, it was pouring. I settled into the driver's seat, George's voice calm and steady in my ear through the radio. "All right, Kath, take it slow at first. Let's see what she can do." The car purred to life beneath me, and I eased onto the track. Even through the rain-slicked surface, I could feel the difference. The handling was smoother, the acceleration more responsive. "How's it feeling?" Georgia asked. I couldn't keep the excitement out of my voice. "Like a dream. Georgia, this is incredible." As I pushed the car faster, navigating through the rain and wind, I felt a rush of adrenaline. This was what I lived for. The thrill of the race, the perfect harmony between driver and machine. Suddenly, a gust of wind caught the car, sending it into a spin. For a heart-stopping moment, I thought I was going to crash. "Kath." Georgia's panicked voice came through the radio. "Are you okay?" I gritted my teeth, fighting for control. Time seemed to slow down as I remembered every lesson, every bit of advice Georgia had ever given me. With a Herculean effort, I managed to pull the car out of the spin, bringing it to a stop on the grass. For a moment, all I could hear was the pounding of my heart and the steady drum of rain on the roof. Then George's voice, tight with worry. "Catherine, talk to me." I let out a shaky laugh. "I'm okay." Gosh, that was close. I could hear the relief in her voice. "Don't you ever scare me like that again, Turner." As the adrenaline faded, I was left with a profound sense of clarity. The risk, the excitement, the partnership with Georgia, this was what I was meant for. I drove back to the pit slowly, my mind racing faster than any car ever could. When I pulled in, Georgia was there in an instant, pulling me into a fierce embrace. "Don't you ever do that to me again," she murmured into my hair. I held her tight, feeling the rapid beat of her heart against mine. "I won't," I promised. "Not without you by my side." As we stood there in the rain, clinging to each other, I knew we'd crossed a threshold. We'd faced the storm, literal and metaphorical, and come out stronger. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever obstacles we might face, I knew we could handle them. Because we had each other, and we had this incredible machine Georgia had created. The road to success was still long and winding, but for the first time, I could see the finish line. And with Georgia by my side, I knew we'd cross it together. The sun was just peeking over the horizon as Georgia and I pulled into the parking lot of our newly minted racing headquarters. It had been a year since that stormy night when we'd tested her revolutionary engine design, and what a year it had been. "Ready for this?" Georgia asked, squeezing my hand. I took a deep breath, drinking in the sight of our logo emblazoned on the building. "Born ready," I replied with a grin. As we walked in, I couldn't help but marvel at how far we'd come. From late nights poring over business plans to battling corporate lawyers, we'd faced it all together. And now, here we were, about to announce our team to the world. The press conference was set for noon, but we had work to do first. Georgia disappeared into her workshop, muttering about last-minute tweaks, while I headed to my office to review my speech one last time. I was halfway through when there was a knock at the door. It was Marcus, looking more relaxed than I'd seen him in years. "How's it going, boss?" he asked with a smirk. I rolled my eyes at the title. "Still feels weird to hear that from you." He chuckled, settling into a chair. "Well, get used to it. You two have built something special here." We chatted for a while, going over last-minute details for the press conference. As he was leaving, Marcus paused at the door. "You know," he said, his voice uncharacteristically soft, "I always knew you had it in you, Catherine. Both of you. I'm proud to be part of this team." I blinked back sudden tears. "Thanks, Marcus. We couldn't have done it without you." As the morning wore on, the building came to life. Our small but dedicated team arrived, each person buzzing with excitement. I could feel the energy building, like the moments before a big race. At 11:30, Georgia appeared in my office doorway, looking stunning in a tailored suit. "You ready for this, Turner?" I stood up, smoothing down my own suit. "With you by my side?" "Always." We made our way to the conference room, hand in hand. Just before we entered, Georgia pulled me aside. "No matter what happens in there," she said, her green eyes intense, "I want you to know that this, us, is the best thing that's ever happened to me." I cupped her face in my hands, overwhelmed with love. "Georgia Washington, you are the best thing that's ever happened to me. Now let's go show the world what we can do." The press conference was a whirlwind of flashing cameras and rapid-fire questions. We unveiled our team name, Phoenix Racing, rising from the ashes of our old careers, and introduced our revolutionary engine design. The reporters were skeptical at first, but as Georgia delved into the technical details, I could see the excitement growing in their eyes. By the end, the room was buzzing with energy. As we wrapped up, a voice called out from the back. "Miss Turner, there are rumors that your relationship with MS Washington goes beyond professional. Care to comment?" The room fell silent, all eyes on us. I glanced at Georgia, saw the slight nod she gave me, and made a split-second decision. I reached out and took her hand, intertwining our fingers. "Georgia isn't just my business partner," I said, my voice steady. "She's the love of my life, my better half, and the reason I'm standing here today. Our relationship is the foundation of everything we've built." There was a moment of stunned silence, then the room erupted. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, but all I could focus on was Georgia's radiant smile. As we left the conference room, ducking past the clamoring reporters, I pulled Georgia into a quiet corner. "I hope that was okay," I said, suddenly nervous. "I know we hadn't planned on going public like that." She cut me off with a kiss that left me breathless. "It was perfect," she murmured against my lips. We were interrupted by Marcus, who looked both amused and exasperated. "If you two lovebirds are done, we've got a team to run." Laughing, we followed him back to the main floor, where our team was waiting. As I looked around at the faces, some familiar, some new, all excited for the future, I felt a surge of pride and determination. "All right, everyone," I called out, my voice carrying across the room. "We've made our splash. Now it's time to prove we're not just talk. We've got a lot of work ahead of us, but I know we can do it, because we're not just a team, we're a family." A cheer went up, and as everyone dispersed to their stations, I felt Georgia's arm slip around my waist. "Nice speech, boss," she teased. I turned to her, drinking in the sight of her smile, the sparkle in her eyes. "I meant every word," I said softly, "especially the family part." Her expression softened. "I know, so what's our next move?" I grinned, feeling that familiar rush of excitement that only came from racing and from being with Georgia. "Well," I was thinking, "how about we make it official? Not just the team, but us." Georgia's eyes widened. "Catherine Turner, are you proposing to me in the middle of our racing headquarters?" "Maybe," I said, suddenly nervous. "Is that okay?" Her answer was another kiss. This one filled with promise and a future I could hardly wait to start. As we broke apart, breathless and grinning, I knew that this was just the beginning. We had a team to lead, races to win, and a life to build together, and I couldn't wait for every moment of it. "So," Georgia said, her eyes dancing with mischief and love. "Ready to start our victory lap?" I laughed, pulling her close. "With you? Always." As we walked back into the bustling heart of our new team hand in hand, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we'd face them together, because that's what families do. And Georgia, this team, this life we were building, it was the best kind of family I could have ever dreamed of. The road ahead was long, winding, and probably full of unexpected turns. But with Georgia by my side, I was ready for the ride of my life. After all, isn't that what racing and love is all about?